Recording now and then.
So you got 2 minutes to preparation time. You're gonna start the timer when it rings.
There's just two of them? There's just two of them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have 2 minutes to prep. Once it, like, prep time is done, do we start?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Well, good luck. They came back for a sec.
Wait, if we have a 2 stretch time right now, do we still get prep from Jody?
Yeah, we get the 2 minutes throughout the debate, right? To like pause.
Do they get 2 minutes throughout the debate? That's how we've been practicing, just like we get.
As far as I know, the format that we were provided on that is the format that we were using. Yeah. So that's 2 minutes of prep time, that's all I've got.
So just at the beginning?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so just type.
Yeah.
If we have questions, we don't need to answer it, and if you want to further, you can just choose whether you want to ask the questions at the end.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, just only ask the questions, don't provide any other information. That's fine. Yeah, and don't put any statements. It's gonna be impossible.
You're reading off it. Yeah.
Alright, first speaker, AFF, you have 5 minutes.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Marco Castillo. My teammates are Reagan, Samantha, and Palik. Today our team will be affirming the abolishment of the death penalty. We stand before you today advocating for a cause that transcends borders, ignites passionate debates, and demands our collective reflection. In abolishing of the death penalty, we are calling for the abolishment and the end for the legal authority to execute individuals as a form of punishment for crimes. As we venture into this discourse, it is essential to define the death penalty, which is the punishment of execution administered to someone legally convicted of a capital crime. For centuries, societies grappled with questions of justice, vengeance, and retribution, culminating in the establishment of the systems that wield the power to end a human life in the name of justice. The death penalty, by executing the death penalty, it means to carry out a sentence of death on the condemned person. Today our discussion will prompt us to reflect not only on the past, but on the ethical, physical, and moral choices that shape our present and future. Our discourse extends beyond a mere examination of the actions. It delves into the intricate cause and effects relationships caused by the use of the death penalty. To comprehend the gravity of our stance, let's first acknowledge the far-reaching consequences and debates sparked by the proposition to abolish the death penalty. The pillars upholding our case against the death penalty are the substantial financial impact it has and the moral questions that accompany it. And by eliminating the heavier financial cost of the death penalty, it shows that it heavily outweighs any alternatives to it. As revealed by Peter A. Collins and Eliza Kaplan in 2017, the average death penalty case costs more than a non-death penalty aggravated murder case by staggering amounts. It drains resources that could be allocated more judiciously to societies. The need for extended trials and appeals, coupled with the relative rarity of executions, underscores the exorbitant cost of maintaining the death penalty system. And by showing the people the cost of the death penalty, it also shines a spotlight on the large financial burden falling upon the American public. States like California, Maryland, and Texas, among others, grapple with the economic strain of sustaining the death penalty and diverting resources from essential services like police and highway fundings and other public fundings. This fiscal drain prompts us to question and produce of maintaining a system that fails to yield a commensurate benefit to the American public. And by turning our attention to the impact The death penalty also has on human morals underscores the truth. The death penalty does not provide closure to the victims' families. The myth that executions bring relief has been debunked by Susan A. Bandis. With no bias in psychological research, families often find themselves re-victimized and grappling with unfulfilled hopes of closure. We also draw our attention to the protracted nature of the death penalty process. The average time between sentencing and executions has tripled since 1984, leaving families of victims to endure prolonged pain as cases navigate numerous court proceedings, appeals, and setbacks. In our ensuing discussion, we will navigate the intricate web of implications surrounding these claims and examining the intersection of ethics, economics, and justice. The argument is clear. Abolishing the death penalty is not only economically prudent, but it also is a necessary step for the well-being of the victims' families. And that's it.
Thank you.
First speaker, MEG.
Hi, my name is. Oh,
One
yes,
moment.
my.
Okay. Alright,
Hi, my name is Nang, and today my team and I will be sharing our views on the death penalty. The death penalty has been a huge topic of debate on whether it's ethical and unethical to abolish it or to not abolish it. We will be sharing some of our points as to why the death penalty should not be abolished and how it will benefit us. We will also be backing up our points with evidence we have collected through our research. Our first and foremost point is that the death penalty deters future crimes. It is better to prevent crimes from being committed in the first place than finding solutions on how to deal with it later. There are also crimes out there that are too inhumane to the point where incarceration is not enough for them, such as torture, murder, rape, etc. Incarcerating them is not going to do anything to prevent future crimes from being committed. It will not bring any justice. They would need a heavy and severe punishment that fits the crime, such as the death penalty. The death penalty will only punish those who have committed heinous and unethical crimes, the worst of the worst. It will also set an example for future offenders on what their actions can lead to. This will lead to less crimes from being committed, such as murder. In a 2014 study by the Daily Signal, it was reported that more than 3,000 counties from 1977 through 1996 found that each execution on average resulted in 18 fewer murders per county. In another examination based on data from all 50 states from 1978 to 1997, Federal Communication Commission economist Paul Zimmerman demonstrated that each state execution deters an average of 14 murders annually. This shows that the death penalty does have an effect on future crimes. By having a severe punishment in place, it decreases the crime rates, or at least the severity of the crime, as well as save lives at the same time. It also sets a punishment that is proportionate to the crime. Our second and next point is that incarceration ruins the mental health of inmates and increases reoffending rather than decrease it. Although incarceration is supposed to incapacitate criminals and rehabilitate them, it instead ruins their lives and mental health, causing them to reoffend again once released. Being incarcerated destabilizes their lives and disassociates them from society so that once they are released, they are left with nothing to return back to. No home, no family, no purpose, nothing. In the 2021 article by Prison Policy Initiative, it states that the carceral environment can be inherently damaging to mental health by removing people from society and eliminating meaning and purpose from their lives. On top of that, the appalling conditions common in prisons and jails, such as overcrowding, solitary confinement, and routine exposure to violence, can have future negative effects. Researchers have even theorized that incarceration can lead to post-incarceration syndrome, a syndrome similar to PTSD, meaning that even after serving their official sentences, many people continue to suffer the mental effects. This is a big issue. Long confinement in jails, isolated and overcrowded, can cause inmates to be depressed, traumatized, and anxious, which ultimately leads to a lack of purpose in life. This stays with them for a long time and negatively impacts the outcome of their future. Returning back to crime is all that they know after being let out, which is why reoffending increases rather than decreases. In the 2023 article by Vera Institution of Justice, it states that custodian sentences do not prevent reoffending and can actually increase it. That's because incarceration destabilizes people's life. The brutality of U.S. prison, the difficulties securing employment and housing, the conviction history, and the overall lack of financial security all negatively impact people and their ability to succeed after prison. Basically, after being incarcerated, it's hard to get back on your feet and build yourself up. It is especially more difficult since everyone around you perceives you as a criminal now. Who would want to offer a job to someone with a criminal record or sell a house? No one. This leads to our final point, which also ties with our previous point, that the death penalty, that death row inmates, rather than being on the death row and being isolated and confined for a long period of time, would prefer to be put to death. There is no point in living the rest of your life in a cell, rotting away without hope or purpose, treated unethically, inhumanely, and having your family deal with the fact that you will spend the rest of your life in prison. In the 2015 article by the New Republic of Human Rights found that many inmates prefer death and volunteer for their own execution. Others don't wait. The suicide rate on death row is at least 6 times higher than in the general prison population. Given that death row is associated with the harshest condition of confinement, this is hardly surprising. Inmates prefer death rather than incarceration to the point where they would commit suicide.
No, I'm sorry, but you're no, sorry, I thought you asked. Alrighty, crossfire between the first speakers, you have 2 minutes. Whenever you guys are ready.
Okay. Do you think that a prison reform would be better than the death penalty overall?
I think prison could be reformed, but the death penalty could also be reformed as well.
How so?
How so? Well, we could look more into like specific cases so that we don't kill innocent people, and lowering costs for it so that it doesn't cost as much, and probably just make it more efficient and try to keep them from being biased and discriminating.
And you said that inmates who are on death row kill themselves. Why give death row inmates something that they want, like the death penalty or death, if that is the punishment for their crime? How do we justify their punishment being a reward for them?
Because that's more humane, actually. Because that's what people would usually argue about the death penalty, that it's inhumane and stuff. But it's better than being confined in prisons for a long period of time, struggling. Because even in prisons, there's still like rape and murders and still going on. It doesn't stop that from happening. I have a question. So you said that it has a financial impact, but doesn't imprisoning them for longer periods of time over and over again cost more than just killing them once?
It actually doesn't. The total cost for the death penalty being applied is substantially more longer than it is to hold somebody for the rest of their life, even if they were on death row for a long period of time. But don't you think that we could build more jails in order to avoid overcrowding rather than the money used to kill those people in death penalty?
If the solution isn't fixed at the root, then it will just keep increasing. If we have to build more jails, more jails, more jails, more jails, and it'll never stop. So we have to fix the root of it.
Don't you think that the death penalty deters? You think that the death penalty deters future?
Yeah, for AFF.
Okay. I'd like to remind you that we are affirming the resolution the death penalty should be abolished. As my partner already established, the death penalty is immoral and costly. According to DBIC, the death penalty is far more expensive than a system utilizing life without parole sentences. Some of the reasons for the high cost are the longer trials and appeals required when a person's life is on the line, the need for more lawyers and experts on both sides of the case, and the relative rarity of executions. Most cases in which the death penalty is sought do not end up with the death penalty being imposed. And once a death sentence is imposed, the most likely outcome of the case is that the conviction or death sentence will be overturned in the courts. Most defendants who are sentenced to death essentially end up spending life in prison, but at a highly inflated cost because the death penalty was involved in the process. The death penalty is a leakage of money, and due to the questions of morality it imposes, its costs commonly end up being wasted anyway. Why not just do away with this sloppy policy altogether? Furthermore, according to Loyola University, a New York study compared a $1.4 million cost figure for each death penalty trial with a $602,000 for the cost of life imprisonment. Florida has estimated that the true cost of each execution is approximately $3.2 million, or approximately 6 times what it would cost to keep the person in prison for life. The cost of the death penalty is disastrously harmful to the economy, and the ends do not justify the means in the slightest. Why are we disrupting our global economy for modernized torture? But further than that, the death penalty has repeatedly proven to be on the wrong side of history. According to Frontline, the first death sentence historically recorded occurred in 16th century BC Egypt, where a member of nobility was accused of magic and ordered to take his own life. As punishment for crimes such as insulting songs, the cutting of crops planted by a farmer, the burning of a stack of corn, making disturbances at night, death was often cruel and included crucifixion, drowning at sea, burial alive, beating to death, and impalement. The most infamous execution in history occurred with the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. During the Middle Ages, capital punishment was accompanied by torture, and in 1279, 289 Jews were hanged for clipping coin. Under Edward I, 2 gatekeepers were killed because the city gate had not been closed in time to prevent the escape of an accused murderer. In 1930, Mrs. Ava Dugan became the first female to be executed by Arizona. The execution was botched when the hangman misjudged the drop, and Mrs. Dugan's head was ripped from her body. Over time, the death penalty has proven to contribute to inhumane operations that no sane and morally justified person can proudly support. Moving on to our opponent's case, the flaws are clear. The NEG claims that the threat of the death penalty deters people from committing crimes, but to value fear over the inalienable rights of life is abhorrent. In fact, the countries in which the death penalty is used as deterrence are disproportionately dictatorships, such as China and North Korea. Is this really the model we'd like to strive for globally? Why should we prioritize deterrence when we already live in a world where the death penalty is legal and heinous crimes punishable by death are still committed? This is not a debate on whether or not humanity has earned itself punishment. This is a debate on whether or not execution should be abolished, and it should be for the reasons we have stated. Additionally, the NEG uses absolute statements that have no place in this debate, claiming that a convict's only options are to either be executed or eventually be released from prison and go back to committing crimes because it is all they know is also abhorrent. These people are still human, and the NEG seems to be referring to them as mutts, just something to put down when it feels they may be hard to control. Overall, the NEG's claims simply just are not strong enough to defect our affirmative case. Finally, according to DBIC.org, some victims' families prefer life without parole to the uncertainty of securing a death sentence and the likelihood of many years of appeals before an execution would occur. Many prosecutors have also concluded that the high costs associated with the capital cases are unaffordable, especially with the high rate of reversals. Rather than exhaust both the emotional state of each country's citizens as well as the overall global economy, research shows that a much more beneficial alternative is simply enacting life without parole. As previously stated, most cases in which the final decision of the court is to enact the death penalty end up being dragged out as a more expensive form of life without parole anyway. Additionally, we have evidence that sentencing convicts to life without parole has the opportunity to offer an equal amount, if not more, closure to the families of the victims. In conclusion, we must abolish the death penalty. The decision is long overdue. Thank you.
Alright, NEG, second speaker.
Hello, my name is Kieran Thomas. I would like to explain that the death penalty should remain legal because it is a very humane process that is paid for by society to ensure a better, safer society. The death penalty is not to torture in any way, shape, or form every individual executed or in the predicament for being caught in a serious crime or act. The death penalty is a difficult issue for many Americans on moral, religious, and policy grounds. But as a legal issue, it is straightforward. The United States Constitution expresses that capital crimes and Congress has authorized death penalty for serious federal offenses, which has been going on since the 1970s. Yet the death penalty for people convicted of murder continues to draw support from the majority of Americans, despite widespread doubts about its administration, fairness, and whether it deterrents from serious crimes. A majority of Americans support the death penalty and have been since beginning in 1938. I also believe some of their facts contradict themselves when they mention how it costs more, but building more jails and housing serious inmates for long periods of time is very costly versus you paying one simple cost that is paid for by society to end the root of the problem. I believe our previous reasoning has been very supportive to our negative stance. And that's all.
Ready? 2 minutes. Crossfire between the second speakers.
Do you have evidence that the death penalty is a very humane policy like you claim?
The death penalty, it provides a quick execution of the prisoner for their serious crime, and it's humane because it's not like they're torturing them. It's you go for a procedure and it's like one and done.
Okay. Would you consider executing those who have been falsely accused to be humane?
No.
Okay. And then would you say putting money towards the death penalty is a better alternative to putting that money towards reformation of prison?
I believe putting money towards the execution is a better usage of society's money than reformation.
Okay.
Do you believe that reformation of a continuous criminal that convicted serious crimes is better than them getting a death penalty?
Yes, I believe rehabilitation is a better alternative to murder, to the death penalty. I have no more questions.
Do you feel like building multiple jails and continuous of housing serious inmates is a better alternative than to just execution?
Yes, but I don't believe that's what we're arguing for. I believe that overall, it's just the reformation of the prison system, and life without parole system is a better alternative to execution for the reasons that we stated.
I have no questions.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you. Ready? AFF, third speaker, 5 minutes.
The belief that capital punishment brings closure to victims' families is a commonly held notion, but is in fact an illusion. The death penalty does not provide closure for the victims' families, and no one benefits from it. The notion that the death sentences and executions provide closure to victims' families is a myth, says Susan A. Bandes. Closure has no basis in psychological research, Bandes says, and there's no evidence that executions provide relief to victims' families. In fact, research has shown that families often feel re-victimized when an execution does not bring about the closure that they had hoped for. Not only that, but the death penalty is a very lengthy process. In 1984, the average time between sentencing and the execution was about 74 months, or a little over 6 years, according to BGS. By 2019, that figure had more than tripled to 264 months, or 22 years. With that being said, the families of the victims are made to endure the pain on multiple occasions during this period. As the case navigates several court cases, appeals, and setbacks, family members may find it challenging to achieve the closure they desire during this lengthy time of uncertainty and distress, which may hinder the healing process. From a victim survivor's personal experience, they state that, as a victim survivor, I hate the word closure. You close on a mortgage, not a homicide. No sanction will lift the burden for victims. We will be grieving forever. The execution solution, or putting people in prison, won't end the grief. In addition to that, another credible source, such as Lula Redmond, a Florida therapist who works with families of murder victims, says more often than not, families of murder victims do not experience the relief that they expected to feel at the execution. Taking a life does not fill that void, but it's generally not until after the execution that families realize this. The emotional toll and uncertainties surrounding the death penalty only serve to complicate the grieving process, hindering the much sought after closure. We see this clearly in a University of Minnesota study that was published in 2007, attempting to quantify the extent to which victims' family members achieve closure as a result of capital punishment. The study found that only 2.5% of victims' family members, roughly 1 in 40, reported achieving closure, while 20.1% said that the execution did not help them heal. We argue that the notion of capital punishment bringing closure to victims' families is an illusion. The system is unable to meet the complex emotional demands of people impacted by horrible acts because of its inherent weaknesses drawn out by legal procedures and moral uncertainties. Thank you.
Okay, I'm not too sure how it works with it on the letter.
Do you just want us?
I could just like summarize for a short, 1 minute or something. I could just summarize my case for 1 minute.
Okay, no, that's fine. I wasn't too sure if you were going to go as
Oh.
third speak, like, you know, if y'all are doubling up or not.
Do you want me to keep it at 1 minute, or do you want me to keep it at 5 minutes then?
If it gives them 5 minutes, then I'll just go ahead and go with 5 minutes if that's what we're supposed to have.
Yeah. Okay.
Just make sure you give the others that time too.
Got it. Third speaker, NEG, 5 minutes.
Summarizing our case, I still believe that the penalty is a more effective way to deal with future crimes. The death penalty doesn't really I believe that the death penalty does deter future crimes. It doesn't deter it all the time, but most of the times it sets an example for people to see what their actions could lead to. So they have something to look to and see the consequences. Incarceration ruins the mental health and increases reoffending, and I think that's a big issue because most of the points that the affirmatives talks about are that the death penalty is inhumane and that a lot of people think that it's unethical, but I feel like hurting someone's mental health is worse. Okay, I think that's it. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
And then it's gonna be the grand crossfire with all speakers. You guys get 3 minutes. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So you say that incarceration ruins mental health, that's one of your biggest arguments. So do you think that death is a better alternative to like depression?
I believe that for depression, I believe that rehabilitation is the best way, but committing a crime, which is like what we're talking about, committing a serious crime deserves execution.
Okay, you stated that it does not deter crime like all the time, so why should we continue this way of the death penalty rather than find a more effective alternative?
Because the death penalty fixes the problem at the root and it prevents future crimes. It decreases future crimes from committed. But if you were to, incarceration doesn't really guarantee that person. Incarceration and reformation doesn't really guarantee that the individual will change. And people don't change all the time, and so future crimes can still be committed, even after all the reformation and incarceration that they go through.
Is this not reason enough to revamp our system of justice? Like, why give them the easy way out? Like, there's life sentences for a reason.
Oh yeah, but
Revamping the system of justice would be more costly than to solve the problem on hand with execution deadlines.
Is that your only justification for that, the cost?
No, but I'd be like, the cost of the death penalty would be way more cheaper and way more effective, and way more Americans believe in that than fixing the justice.
You say way more Americans believe in that. Just because something is more popularly normalized, does it make it okay? Or do you think that just because something is legal, like you said, that this is the correct legal proceeding? Things like slavery that were long-standing were also legal, but were they okay?
well, I don't think slavery and the death penalty are similar in any case, but I think that the death penalty, just because it's legal doesn't always mean that it's correct. Like, nothing is perfect, so there can be ways to fix them and reform them, and just like prisons, I think that the death penalty can be reformed and better in the future than just abolishing it altogether.
It's time.
Okay. Fourth speaker, AFF, 5 minutes.
As we draw the curtain on this debate, we find ourselves confronted with a crucial question that goes beyond legal frameworks, moral principles, and the very essence of our humanity. Should the death penalty be abolished? Today we have presented a plethora of reasons why the answer to this question should be a resounding yes. It counteracts from our very own Constitution, where every citizen has the right to live and be treated equally. There are certain inalienable rights that absolutely cannot be taken away, and your argument rules against it. The irreversible nature of the death penalty demands an unattainable level of certainty. Moreover, we've explored the ethical and moral dilemmas that surround the very concept of state-sanctioned death. Is it not a contradiction to assert the sanctity of life while simultaneously endorsing a punishment that extinguishes it? This is hypocrisy at its peak. The death penalty is seen by some as a violation of the fundamental human right to life, and as morally unacceptable. Furthermore, let's not forget the profound impact that the death penalty has on the families and communities involved. The protracted legal processes, the emotional toll on those awaiting execution, and the scars left on the families of both victims and the accused are part of the hidden costs that cannot be measured in dollars and cents. Therefore, it probably isn't too costly to house convicts. We must also confront the underlying question of whether the death penalty aligns with the evolving values of our society. As we celebrate the progress made over the past years, let us consider whether a punishment rooted in retribution, with its moral contradictions and potential for irreversible error, truly reflects the compassionate and forward-thinking society we aspire to be. The essence of justice lies not only in punishment but in rehabilitation, in fostering a society that seeks to address the root causes of crime rather than